For those of you just joining us, welcome. You are at the session titled Collaborating Efforts to Strengthening Cities' Resilience to Climate and Disaster Risks. We will begin in just a moment here, but before we get started, we would like to let you know that this meeting will be recorded for documentation purposes. Furthermore, your participation using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen is highly encouraged. The chat box is also available in case you have any perspectives you'd like to share, or if you need to reach out to me for technical assistance. We are ready to get started, and I will now pass the floor to Furba Lendup, Head of Climate Change and Disaster Risk Reduction Cluster of AIT Regional Resource Center for Asia and the Pacific. Furba, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. A very good morning from Thailand. I, on behalf of the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific and our organizing agencies, would like to welcome all of you our session on collaborating efforts to strengthen city resilience to climate change and disaster risks. This session is jointly organized by the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific, United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, Institute for Global Environment Strategies, and the Ministry of Environment, Japan. Our speakers today are from the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific, United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction, the Institute for Global Environment Strategies, Government of Santa Rosa City, the Philippines, and Tirbuam University in Nepal. Now, let me firstly share you how this session will unfold. This is a 90-minute session, and it will start with the welcome address followed by 2 keynotes. Then we have 2 rounds of panel discussion, the first one for 40 minutes and the next for 30 minutes, along with the conclusion. I will be asking questions to the panel members, so it will be a kind of a conversation, but they will also show a few referencing slides while discussing in the panel. For each round, we will take questions from the audience. So please type your questions in the chat box, or sorry, in the question box. And we will do our best to attend your questions. However, if we don't find adequate time to do that, we would like to apologize in advance, and you can always reach us through email. Now, just to put the context, I would like to start by saying that we all agree that climate change is perhaps one of the most discussed and debated topic of our time. And now there are increasingly many credible scientific reports indicating that climate change impact will continue to unfold. And one of the places at the forefront of this climate change battle is our cities, because close to 70% of the global carbon emission comes from our city. Much of the key and emerging global climate risks are concentrated in the cities and urban areas. However, over the years, there has been a number of initiatives. You know, the cities have been setting tough emission targets, investing in greener infrastructure, providing subsidies for renewable energy, and building parks, municipal sinks to reduce the carbon footprint. And latest in the road that I personally like is the concept of the sponge city, a new urban construction model for flood management, strengthening ecological infrastructure and drainage system. However, the climate change impacts will continue to rise. Adaptation is not a one-time effort, but an ongoing cycle of preparation, response, and revision. It is a dynamic process, and one should be revisited over time to collect new information. So today, our session is to strengthen our knowledge and understanding in making our city resilient by sharing and discussing some of the best practices and experience that our panel members will bring on in the conversation today. This will then help us how adaptation and disaster risk reduction can be sustained and be integrated into our urban planning and best practice management. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Naoya Tsukamoto, who is the Director of the Regional Resource Center for Asia and Pacific here at the AIT, to kindly deliver the welcome address for the session participants and the panelists. By the way, Dr. Naoya has served, prior to this position, he served as a speaker, and he served, as a senior environmental engineering for the World Bank, head of the Japan delegation to IPCC 4th assessment report, He was also the chair and board member of the Adaptation Fund, member of the Adaptation Committee of UNFCCC, Secretary General and Principal Researcher for the Institute for Global Environment Strategies, and Project Director under the United Nations University Institute for Advanced Study and Sustainability. So I would like to welcome Dr. Naoya-san to kindly provide the key welcome address. The floor is yours now, San.
Thank you, Furuba. Professor Kazuhiko Takeuchi, President, the Institute of Global Environmental Strategy, Mr. Marco Toscano Rivalta, Chief, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, distinguished participants, our partners, speakers, colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you on this session, collaborating efforts to strengthening cities' resilience to climate and disaster risks. I would also like to express my gratitude to the 7th Asia-Pacific Adaptation Forum organizers and our key partners and co-organizers for their input and collaboration to organize this session. Please let me say a few words about our center. RRC.AP was established 31 years ago as a joint initiative of AIT and UN Environment. As a science policy platform in Asia and the Pacific region, RRC.AP aims to bridge the gap between the scientific knowledge and policy implementation on the sustainable development from the environmental aspect. RRC.AP has been providing capacity building, knowledge sharing, policy development to our stakeholders. Let's talk our challenges. More than 1/2 of the world's population lives in urban areas, most of which are predisposed to natural and human-made hazards. Some reports indicate that the fastest growing cities in Asia and the Pacific region are among the most susceptible to the threat of climate change over the next 30 years. Exposure to risk, especially by the urban poor, has increased with rapid population growth and encroachment on wetlands, floodplains, riverbanks, steep slopes, and other hazard-prone areas. Climate change and rapid urbanization exacerbate many of the risks in cities and the region. With the frequency and the intensity of disasters increasing, the urban poor in the region are facing a more significant threat. The implication of this reality means that there is a need for countries in the Asia and the Pacific region to greater focus their collective energies to create a safer world for urban dwellers and develop a series of innovative approaches to meet this challenge. Let's talk on cities. According to the World Bank, although cities are home to just over 1/2 of the world's population, they generate more than 80% of global GDP. Cities require substantial inputs to support this level of economic activity. Local resources scarcity can require cities to improve resources from far beyond their boundaries, constructing complex infrastructure systems to transport essentials such as water, food, and energy. The social and ecological impact of urban areas, therefore, stretch for beyond city boundaries. Cities can also be hotspots of vulnerability, as illustrated by the growing number of urban dwellers in hazard-prone areas. Their exposure and susceptibility to risk is mediated by urban forms and functions. Low-income and other vulnerable urban residents, women, children, elderly, migrants, and people living with disabilities are therefore likely to be particularly vulnerable. In the face of both resource scarcity and environmental hazards, cities are strategically positioned to be leaders of change, placed at an intermediary scale between individuals and nation-state. Cities are in a position to affect others in unique ways. City governments often have relevant power over spatial planning, solid waste management, and architectural standards, although their institutional, technical, and financial capacity to address these varies greatly. The density and the proximity of urban areas reduce the economic and environmental cost of providing infrastructure and services. As people and economic activities are concentrated, cities are in advantage to widely share information and effectively implement policies. Finally, efforts to build resilience in cities can benefit from integrating disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptation with existing efforts in disaster risk management, sustainable development, and other similar planning processes. The current and further challenges of mainstreaming climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction can benefit significantly from strategic collaboration and experience sharing. These challenges cannot be addressed individually. We must work collectively to fulfill our ambition of sustainable and harmonious development of our cities. I envisage that this session will bring together diverse perspectives about climate change and disaster resilience in the context of cities. I do hope that this session will provide a good opportunity for us to share information, best practices, successful methodologies, and new approaches towards water security and climate resilient urban settlements. I wish you all to have an interesting and fruitful session today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Naosan, for your welcome address and also outlining some of the important problems that cities are facing at the problem, especially looking at the urban poor and a lot of other problems that needs very holistic sort of an approach. Now, after this, for our first keynote speaker, I have the pleasure of inviting here Professor Kazuhiko Takushi, who is the president of the the Institute for Global Environment Strategies, and he is also the board of trustees of the Asian Institute of Technology. Prior to this current position, Professor was a senior rector at the United Nations University from 2008 to 2016, and an assistant general at the United Nations from 2013 to 2016. He has served as an acting chair of the Central Environment Council, chair of the Nature Conservation Committee of the Central Environment Council, Government of Japan, editor-in-chief of the journal Sustainability Science, and distinguished chair of the Wangari Maathai Institute for Peace and Environment at the University of Nairobi in Kenya. He also served in numerous positions in other universities, both in Japan and also abroad. We are very honored to have you here in our session, Professor. So I would like to request you to kindly deliver your keynote address.
Thank you very much, Chair, for your very kind introduction. Distinguished participants, speakers, and organizers of the 7th Asia-Pacific Adaptation Forum. It is a great pleasure for me to deliver keynote remarks in this session, jointly organized by AIT, RRC.AP, IGES, UNDRR, and MoEJ. Despite significant efforts made on disaster risk reduction by the international community, in the last decade, we have witnessed the worst disasters in living memory. We are all very much aware that disaster risks are increasing rapidly and the impacts of climate change are now a harsh reality, triggering unprecedented and frequent disasters in various locations every year. Extreme disasters are adding a major fiscal burden to governments and society, holding back sustainable development aspirations. We must take prudent measures to address the challenges in a synergetic way as we move ahead on achieving the SDGs. Recently, Japan has adopted a strategy for enhancing the synergy between climate action and disaster risk reduction through adaptive recovery. This lays out effective strategies for coordinated measures that bring together the Paris Agreement, the Sendai Framework for DRR, and the SDGs. For adaptive recovery from climate disasters, we need to embrace the response, recovery, and redesign, or triple R framework. In particular, the redesign dimension is about resilient society through a multi-sector and multi-level cooperation that can address various risks such as the COVID-19. Redesign also emphasizes promoting a progressive idea of pre-disaster reconstruction as opposed to the post-disaster reconstruction we all know. Additionally, we have the concept of regional circulating and ecological sphere, or in short, regional CES, that is included in the 5th Basic Environmental Plan of Japan, where I served as the chair of the Central Environment Council. The regional CES provides a transformative approach in public policy making, aiming to strengthen local communities and local economies, which is essential for effective and sustained DRR and CCA integration. The regional CES concept was framed based on an integrated policy approach that incorporates 3 societal images. First, a decarbonized society. Second, a resource circulating society. And third, a society in harmony with nature, which in essence can be a future model for resilient cities. Under the regional CES, we need to think more holistically about strengthening urban-rural linkages and exchange. Let me give you a concrete example from Japan. Nagano Prefecture has been facilitating localization of the SDGs and the regional CES. In the rural city of Ina in Nagano, natural resources are fully appreciated and bioeconomies have been developed based on the strengths and characteristics of the area. Additionally, those resources are circulated to neighboring regions. We need to upscale such cases of regional CES, and in this way, it can create a foundation for resilient societies based on sustainable use of natural capital and ecosystem services. However, the proposed solution has to be locally appropriate as each city is different. We must ask ourselves, how can we combine global challenges with the local challenges? How to appropriately combine hard infrastructure with green infrastructure, because it is hard to avoid a resilience on hard infrastructure for many built-up areas. So when we talk about a regional CES, we don't mean it just as a concept. Rather, it is more about being pragmatic and taking a balanced approach. Distinguished participants, our attention is fixed on two important events happening this year. First is COP15 of the CBD on biodiversity to be held in Kunming. And then we have the COP26 on the UNFCCC on climate change due to take place in Glasgow. These events provide an opportunity to combine biodiversity with climate issues such as nature-based solutions. These issues have gained significant momentum in international discourse due to their effectiveness and their wide-ranging synergies for society in harmony with nature. Let me conclude by wishing you a very successful session with lively discussion and hope that we can come up with some useful messages for these international events to be held later in this year. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your very enriching keynote address. And I think Professor touched on, I think, three most important international agreements that we have all committed to. Those are the Paris Agreement, Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So it's very important that we must all live up to it to make our commitment. And also, Professor briefly mentioned about some of the initiatives that Japan has been taking ahead. We are very much indeed thankful for government of Japan for always been taking lead in the region to adapt to climate change in the region as a whole. And also briefly touched upon the importance of the natural capital and the ecosystem services, and linking that to the upcoming session, the Convention on Biological Diversity COP, and also the Climate COP, which are two very important issues where we can try to integrate climate and nature, which is now widely known as nature-based solutions, or previously it was rather known as ecosystem-based adaptation. So there are several terminologies like that, but at the end of the day, I think it basically means the same. So thank you so much once again, Professor, for your keynote. Now for our
Thank you very much.
Now for our next keynote, I have the pleasure of inviting Mr. Marco Tanscano Rivalta, who is currently the Chief of United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Regional Office for Asia and Pacific here in Bangkok. And at the moment, he's connecting from New York. I think it's probably very late into the night there in New York. Prior to this position, he was the Chief of United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction Office in New York. He also served as the Chief of the Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and co-chair of the Bureau of Third World Conference of Disaster Risk Reduction, where he supported the drafting and negotiation of one of the very important framework, that is Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. He also has 20 years of international experience and served with UN and various other international organizations. If I understood correctly, this is one of the first event in the region in his new capacity as the Chief of UNDRR for Asia and Pacific. And we are very much honored to have you, sir, for this session. And thank you very much for consenting to deliver keynote on this session. The floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Furba, for your very kind introduction and for having me today. It's really an honor, and it is true, is one of my very first appearances in my new capacity, and I'm very happy that I can join here from New York. So thank you for this. And it's really great for me to be part of this forum, and I would like to extend my gratitude to the Asian Institute of Technology's Regional Resource Center for Asia and the Pacific for your leadership in organizing these sessions, and to all partners. And also my thanks to you and to Dr. Tsukamoto and Professor Takeuchi for your important remarks in framing today's conversation. As it is still the 8th of March here in New York, is just 20 minutes to midnight, I would like to wish you all a happy International Women's Day. Women's leadership is vital to strengthen resilience to climate and disaster risk, and an essential element of our discussion today. Indeed, given the disproportionate impact of disasters on women, it would be difficult, if not impossible, for communities to achieve resilience to climate and disaster risk without addressing gender inequality. For more insights on this, I invite you to review the 2018 General Recommendations number 37 of the UN Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women on the gender-related dimensions of disaster risk reductions in the context of climate change. Such document focuses on the obligation of countries and partners to ensure that the human rights of women and girls are respected, protected, and fulfilled during measures to prevent, mitigate, and respond to disasters and climate. And it leverages on human rights to drive disaster risk reduction and climate action. So it's a really very useful document that I think we can use to drive the implementation of the Sendai Framework. This dimension was already a problem highlighted in the assessment of the Yoga Framework for Action when we were about to negotiate the new instrument. It does still remain an important question, and I think that it does require our collective partnership really to drive this forward. And on this note, we can really say, as been already highlighted also, that disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptations are two complementary approaches that seek to take a strong preventative approach and minimize the harm and damage for climate-induced disasters. And as for as the future of human settlement is increasingly urban, the impacts of these disasters are increasingly felt in cities. Many of the cities in the Asia Pacific are struggling with increased disaster risk as a result of unplanned development. The COVID-19 pandemic has been especially devastating for cities and highlighted the weak links across sectors and systems. The World Bank estimates that about 100 million people are likely to fall into poverty due to the pandemic. And many of these new poor live in cities, and many of these are women. COVID-19, however, is only a symptom of a larger systemic problem, and is a wake-up call to move towards addressing all hazard and risk in an inclusive and multi-sectoral, multi-hazard way. These multi-hazard disaster risk management systems must include climate risk. The science and the consequences are by far clear. And until countries reduce their emissions enough to limit warming to 1.5 degrees, adaptation to a changing climate becomes even more important, and as such the Sendai Framework, to limit the impact of climate-induced disasters. Indeed, extreme weather events are already impacting cities with increasing frequency and intensity. According to our reports, UNDRR's Human Cost of Disaster report, the number of climate-related disasters have nearly doubled over the past 20 years. Last year, unprecedented levels of rainfall caused floods in cities across Indonesia, Japan, China, India, Nepal, and Pakistan, just to name a few. The cycle is now repeating again, and just last month, the city of Jakarta was impacted by monsoon floods that affected over 200 neighborhoods. What these disasters point to is the need for urgent actions to ensure that all development is informed by climate and disaster risk. After all, the Paris Agreement, Sendai Framework are companion and mutually reinforcing instruments, which in and of themselves are instrumental to achieve the SDGs. Their synergistic implementation can drive change. Their coherence can be practically achieved at the local level if disaster risk reduction and climate change adaptations are integrated into local development planning processes. To this aim, the adoption and revision of national and local strategies for disaster risk reductions, as agreed to in the Sendai Framework, is critical. We are behind target. This is target E of the Sendai Framework, and we need to double our efforts. To boost actions and mobilize partnerships and resources, UNDRR has recently launched with partners the Making Cities Resilience 2030 initiative. These initiatives aims to help cities through a three-stage resilience roadmap to assess, plan, and implement local risk reduction strategies. In line with the forum's themes, I would like to present the MCR 2030 as a vehicle by which the 5 enabling conditions for achieving resilience can be met. First of all, it aims to strengthen local climate and risk governance. MCR 2030 calls on cities to reach out to various groups, including civil society, the private sector, academia, women and girls, to ensure a whole of society and multi-sectoral approach. Women's leadership and inequality are vital to this. Women bring essential knowledge, skills, resources, and experience to resilience building. Second, MCR 2030 asks cities to understand their risk by conducting risk assessment, incorporating climate risk projections into their analysis, and using disaggregated data. Third, the initiative sets the development of local disaster risk reductions or resilience building plans as an explicit milestone and a requirement for advancing resilience roadmap. Fourth, it connects cities with one another to learn and exchange ideas and practices, and it connects them with partners and service providers who can support them with technical skills and technologies. Last but not least, MCR 2030 places emphasis on turning plans into actions through financing and implementations. We know very well that financing for disaster risk reduction is still lagging behind, which is why the initiatives includes entities such as the World Bank as a core partner. Cities that are interested in joining can sign up through the MCR 2030 website. We are proud to have the RRC.AP as a supporting partner and a member of the MCR 2030 Regional Coordinating Committee. So thank you for this. In closing, I want to thank the Asia Pacific Adaptation Network for organizing this forum and allowing us to co-host these sessions with our partners at AIT. Thank you very much, and I wish a successful session and a productive forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marco, for your inspirational talk on how we can holistically achieve this climate change and disaster risk reduction, and also making a important connection with the gender balance kinds of approach towards climate, because yes, yesterday here, we sort of like, it was an International Women's Day. So I would also like to join Mr. Marco in conveying a message, wishing everyone a belated happy International Women's Day. And also towards the end of the session, Mr. Marco also touched upon the Making City Resilient 2030 campaign. I think it's a very important campaign that we have at the moment for everyone to come on board in one boat and then work towards that one. And we are very much honored to be part of this campaign. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. So now, without further ado, we would like to sort of like move to our panel session now. So today we have 4 very important panelists with us. So I would firstly like to, we have 2 sessions, a panel session that I've mentioned before. And I would firstly like to start with introducing our panelists first. Now, our first panelist is Ms. Arlene B. Arizales, who is the City Mayor of the Government of City of Santa Rosa City in Laguna in the Philippines, which is also known as the Lion City of the Philippines. And her excellence in public service is widely recognized, most notably the President Linquid Ban Award in 2011, conferred by the Civil Service Commission and Office of the President, which is the highest award in the country given to the individuals with extraordinary contribution that has a nationwide impact on public interest. Under her leadership, the City of Santa Rosa City participatory governance, which allows local government to hear and feel the challenges that people face on day-to-day basis. So we are very much honored to have you in our session, madam, and I hope your experience will be very enriching for us and our participants here. The next panelist we have is Dr. Inu Saliki, who is the assistant professor at the Tribhuvan University Institute of Engineering in Nepal. Her subject of interest includes climate change, urban disaster risk management, cultural heritage, She also worked with different agencies such as ADB, UN Habitat, UNESCO, UNDP, government institutions in managing disaster risk reduction. And she was also actively involved in providing technical support for reconstruction of cultural heritage sites after the 2015 earthquake in Nepal with the Department of Archaeology and other partners. The third panelist we have today is Dr. Binay Raj Shivakoti, who is a senior adaptation specialist with the Institute for Global Environment Strategies. He has over 10 years of professional experience in interdisciplinary research and implementation on adaptation, disaster management, water resources, agriculture, forest, ecosystem management in several countries in Asia. Dr. Binay is currently engaged in designing capacity building approaches. He is also promoting indigenous knowledge and local knowledge on climate change adaptation, as well as local level disaster risk reduction and integration towards climate change. So thank you very much for being on the panel. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Armin Rostam, who is one of our colleagues here at the RRC.AP at the Asian Institute of Technology. He works remotely from Austria, so he's connecting us from Vienna just now. I think it's quite early morning there. And Armin has over 20 years of experience working as a program manager, capacity development specialist, and a lead trainer in the field of disaster risk reduction, climate change, humanitarian, and sustainable development strategies. He has trained a number of people in different international organizations, such as UN, World Bank, Amnesty International, and also have spent so much of time developing programs in about 23 countries in Asia and Africa. So now we will start the panel session. So first on the panel, as I've introduced, we have Ms. Arlene, the mayor of Santa Rosa City. So firstly, my question is like, I would like to ask you that we have heard that Santa Rosa City, or especially the Watershed, has been identified as a very good example for watershed level disaster risk planning and climate change adaptation. We would especially like to hear, through your perspective and experience, what sort of advice that you can give us for engaging with other stakeholder and collaborator in terms of disaster risk reduction and planning process, please.
Okay, first of all, thank you very much for making us a part of this forum and for the Women's Day greeting. The city of Santa Rosa in the province of Laguna, Philippines is tagged, as we mentioned a while ago, as a lion city, a fast emerging economy with a great mix of residential, industrial, and commercial developments. Because of the fast-paced developments, we recognize the challenge of increasing climate hazards and risks to disaster due to climate change and urbanization. Because of this, climate resilient land use planning at the watershed scale comes into play and is very important. With the Santa Rosa watershed, a major part of the city's topography and contributor to water supply and downstream ecology of the city. Therefore, engaging and collaborating with academia and with nearby LGUs, particularly the town of Silang and the cities of Binyan and Cabuyao, is beneficial, especially for planning and vice versa. And the city of Santa Rosa, knowing the importance of these collaborations, remain and has always been open to these collaborations. And with all of our collaborations, we have these observations, advice, and realizations and learnings. First of all, local governments should not just be an audience for scientific reports and researches, but should be an active partner and active participant as well. We can help co-design and should definitely co-implement climate change research with academic institutions, particularly on local impacts of climate change. This will improve the quality of the research as well as improve local governments' understanding and implementation of the policy. Examples of this, Santa Rosa and the neighboring local governments have been working together with the Institute for Global Environmental Strategies, or IGES, and the University of the Philippines, Los Baños, on climate change adaptation research. Local government officials, particularly Santa Rosa, help the researchers to understand the future land use plans of the city through participatory mapping activities, and the researchers help the city understand how this future land use changes, combined with projected climate changes, will affect the city's resilience to floods and other climate hazards. Prior to this was also a collaboration of the city with the WWF on hydrology, in hydrogeology, which allowed us to better understand the surface water regime in the city, its yield and carrying capacities, and the attendant problem of flooding, its causes, and remedial measures we could take. We also had an engagement with the Research Institute for Humanity and Nature of Japan, together with the University of Santo Tomas, which helped us identify groundwater contamination from various nitrate sources, which affects water quality. With these information flows, local government officials then helped in designing climate change countermeasures and incorporate them into relevant plans. Therefore, we were able to do our comprehensive land use plan, local climate change action plan. These studies also help us to tap into domestic and international funds designated for climate change adaptation, for example, the Green Climate Fund, and locally, we have the Climate Change Commission's People Survival Fund. Donors require proposals to include the projected local impacts of climate change, and even large city governments often don't have the time and manpower to conduct this analysis on their own. So we need the academic institutions and other support to be able to have these proposals and thereby be having these funds for approval. On engaging with other local governments, of course, a while ago it was mentioned that climate change issues are cross-boundary. So cooperation mechanisms need to be in place to promote land use planning and management at scales relevant to climate change, for example, the watershed scale. Land use changes in upstream municipalities, for example, have major impacts on flooding in lower elevation downstream municipalities. The city of Santa Rosa is considered a catch basin. So this planning and the plans of other municipalities and cities nearby are very important to us. Santa Rosa has been partnering with the 3 other local government units I mentioned a while ago, located in the Santa Rosa watershed, to share concerns and plans related to climate change and disaster risk reduction, as well as river water quality and groundwater. We established a watershed management council as a formal mechanism for this cooperation and watershed level planning. This idea is now spreading to local governments in other nearby watersheds, which are developing their own similar watershed management councils. So for the city of Santa Rosa, collaborations with academics and other NGOs and other groups are very important, and we do participate actively in these ones, and we really use the researches and the studies that we develop and we collaborate with these institutions. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Unfortunately, Purva is having some connection issues, so I would just like to introduce the next speaker. We will turn it over to Dr. Inu Saliki from Nepal. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Sorry, I just got a bit of a tech issues out here. So thank you, Ms. Arlene, for your insightful presentation. And so sorry for that. I got hanged once because of this technology. So thank you so much for your presentation. Next, I would like to request Dr. Inu Saliki. And the questions that I would like to ask to Dr. Inu is that it has been increasingly become quite popular that colleges and universities are increasingly playing more active role in finding the best way to make our city sustainable. And the engagement of universities and local authorities has been at the forefront in many areas. So from your perspective and your experience being engaged with the government, I would like to know, like, how does universities in Nepal engage and collaborate with local national government to strengthen disaster resilience, be it university or I mean like in Nepal in general? That would be very helpful for us.
Okay, thank you. Namaste. Good afternoon from our side. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mr. Purva, for the questions. as we all know that each country's universities are responsible for producing human resources. We have different kinds of resources, and universities usually produces are responsible for producing skilled human resources. And for Nepal itself, we have different universities: Kathmandu universities, Pokhara, Purvanchal, and Tribhuvan universities. All these universities looks into the need of the society or the nation, and gives offers programs that are related or to the time. Like Tribhuvan University recently, in last 6 to 7 years, we have introduced masters in disaster risk management and masters in climate change. These master's students, when they graduate, usually go into the field and help the local government and different level of government, NGOs, INJ, in building up the resilience. What we also find is that in these program, we have officials from the government, who are in the steering committee, which helps them to mold these courses according to the need of the society. Now, having said that, only giving master's program is not, or the bachelor's program is not only the work that the universities do. What we also are aware is that universities are the center for research. They are the hub of the research, and we see that different researches related to different topics are being done. We have different universities have their centers, like for example, Tribhuvan universities have centers like Center for Disaster Studies, Center for Energy Studies, centers for urban planning studies. These centers have their own thematic area. Especially Center for Disaster Studies works in the area of climate change and disaster risk management. With these centers, different NGOs, INGOs, government they work together to research. One of the research I would like to highlight here is currently there is a research going on with Center for Disaster Studies on future tomorrow's cities. This is in collaboration with NSED, National Society of Earthquake Technology of Nepal, USAID, and also our local authority, Patan Municipal, Lalitpur Municipal. So there is a collaboration between the municipalities, the universities, and different agencies. So these centers work. I would like to also highlight that how the whole process work is somehow we can relate to the EPIC model. Some of the are working on the same models as the EPIC. So the research or the is being done similarly. What we also see that the research from the student side, we are the strength of the universities are the students. So the students help in doing this research through their master's and PhD courses. In the master's program, we usually encourage and also introduce problems that is in the local government, problems that is being in the community, and these research is being done by the students, and also being helpful for the local government. For example, flood management, landslide management. We will also try to figure out the risk maps has been developed by the students, which is being in some cases used by the community or the local government itself. Another point I would like to highlight here is the universities having the experts who can disseminate the knowledge and have the skill of disseminating are helping the government and the local government in disseminating their knowledge in disaster risk management, especially through training programs to the officials working in the community, working with the local government, and also in the government officials. So they give different kinds of training to engineers, even to the politicians who are working as a managers in those areas. They also these experts from the universities are there. So the government also asked the universities to be the partners when they are making policies. I'd like to highlight here recently the National Building Code of Nepal has been amended after 2015 earthquake. Major amendment has been done, and the experts from the universities has been working as a facilitator and as one of the main contributor while doing the amendment of this reports, and also being a reviewer in this phase. So there is a collaboration with the government in making the policies and plans. Furthermore, when there is a need in making specific elective courses related to some themes, these centers are being asked for support, and they give supports in developing these elective courses related. One of the courses, what I can share here is that emergency logistics and telecommunication for WFP, and some electives for Nepal Army and police, who are the frontliners in Nepal in doing rescue and recovery forces during disasters. So what we see is that universities are contributing, giving skilled human resources, as well as they are also helping out the government in different research and development planning processes that we can see. There are some examples that we have seen during the processes when we were developing the climate masters in disaster risk management. We had projects called Center for Natural Resource and Development, funded by German government, and they were helping us in developing this disaster risk management master courses. And we were also being contributed by other network partners in this network to develop it. Currently, we have this project which is being conducted by, as I already said, Center for Disaster Studies, which focuses on bringing urban policies, which focuses on bringing these multi-hazard disaster risk management policies in urban areas and good practices in it. So we see that universities through these centers are working together to address and help the government in developing the resilience of the city. That's from my side, Mr. Purva.
Thank you very much for your insightful talk on how you guys are working in Nepal in terms of making the city resilient, especially collaborating with universities and many other stakeholders. I think that this is very much encouraging for rest of the stakeholders or those cities who have actually not collaborated with the universities to learn. There's also a platform called EPICnet, which is sort of like bringing all universities and cities together. And they have actually sort of like in Africa, there's an EPICnet Africa, and also in Asia, there is going to be another one. So I think it's very important that we work together with this EPICnet as well. So now we are little running short of time. We are just bit behind the schedule. So I would just sort of like continue this session instead of splitting it to two. So I'll just continue to sort of like continue with the conversation with the panelists. The next, so I want to bring on the next, our panelist, who is Dr. Binera Shivakoti. And I would like to start by asking, like, of course, we all know that the IGES has been working on a number of environmental fronts, and especially if you talk about engagement in promoting disaster risk reduction, city resilience, or adaptation, they've done a number of good jobs in Asia, and then like they have helped several countries in Asia and also in the Pacific regions. So I think it will be very important for all the participants to know, or for us to know that what are some of the important areas that you think need to upscale to have a greater impact in the future, and just kind of what are some of your plans? Are you sort of like starting a new plan on climate front, or is it something like you would like to create or expand some of your existing work so that people can just reach out to you for your support, and then it will be very much sort of resourceful for all the adaptation planners to know about that.
Thank you, Mr. Purva, for your nice introduction and for the question. Yeah, I think let me start with the basic thing. I think what we have been observing is that the hazard profile, especially when it comes to hydrometeorological events, they have changed and got stronger. And these are exposing new areas and population and their vulnerabilities that we so far thought were safer or protected. But this kind of phenomena is now prevalent, not irrespective of the development status. For example, if a typhoon hitting Japan and Philippines is likely to have a tremendous and comparable impacts in both areas. So what is lacking, I think we find, is that cities and local government are finding that their existing disaster management system are unable to cope with the extreme disaster. And while they could not plan and properly take appropriate action because of lack of information about what is happening next and what would be the future scenario. And we have, of course, climate models. They are good. They are needed. They are useful, but also they carry a lot of uncertainties. And next, let's say, what if we prepare something like take a very extreme scenario and plan accordingly, but that is also challenging financially. So the cost is very high. So this is a kind of dilemma I think we have been observing in many local areas that we have surveyed or studied or worked. For example, Japan, Malaysia, Laos, Myanmar, Vietnam, Indonesia, and so many other countries. So then I think what is important is I think it has been already made clearer by previous panels. Also, what are the opportunities for future enhancement? Is that we need to think about more on the adaptive approach where there is a continuous learning. So we need, I think, the efforts like how we engage these stakeholders, especially those under risk, in an inclusive manner, and expand the kind of scope of their participation from not just area like early warning, response, or recovery, but more into planning, so that they could understand and interpret the risk by, for example, we have two sources of information, like coming from scientific assessment and as well as other vital information that is based on the observed trends, historical fact, traditional knowledge. So there are so many things that we need to somehow create an environment that allow a kind of significant amount of self-innovation as a part of transformation strategy, in which we not only kind of create a resilient society that is capable to handle like multi-risk scenario, but also adopt a kind of lifestyle change. So like a kind of a permanent shift in lifestyle change that is like similar to like the regional CS concept that we heard in the keynote speech. So point here, I think when we say the opportunities, I think one important thing I think I would like to convey is how we change the mindset of not only government, business, private sector, residents, everybody involved, like including education, so that the DRM is a part of like a day-to-day business under this changing context we are facing due to climate change. So it should not be taken as a kind of a new burden, but a kind of a prudent investment for the future. So, and then when we come to the upscaling, I think what we need to, what we have been seeing is there has been a lot of innovation in the spread of the modern technology, especially ICT technology, and it offers a good opportunity for us to create a active network of self-innovating cities that can rapidly transfer the lesson and best knowledge. So we need to, but here I think I would like to stress that we need to reassess the meaning and functionality of such networks, not just like a supplier of information or practices, such as like creating a new website or platform, but this has to be need-based interactive environment in which the resilient outcomes result into some kind of like a cost saving or rapid transfer of tools, technologies, and idea. And so such networks function like a marketplace or a platform for multi-stakeholder and multi-level engagement, and for that I think the collaboration will be very much important, which I think I will later expand if I have opportunities. So I'd like to stop here, Purva. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Binay, for enriching us on the work that IGES do on the community resilient planning, disaster risk reduction, etc. So thank you so much. Now next, I would like to request my colleague Armin Rostomyan, who is working as a senior program office, senior program specialist with RRC.AP with us. And Armin, I would like to start by asking you that since you have been involved in a lot of this disaster risk reduction planning in a number of the countries, and also even being yourself on the ground, you know, helping the city planners and everything, and having yourself had so much of experience, you know, as a trainer to train a lot of people around the world from different organizations. I would like to know, like, based on your experience, how can disaster risk reduction can be integrated into ongoing national development planning? People call it mainstreaming, and there are several, ideas on how to mainstreaming climate adaptation. And the most important is that how to ensure greater commitment and engagement of local government and other stakeholders in strengthening this city resilience, especially, you know, being inclusive or bringing everyone on the boat for that.
Thank you for the question. Let me start telling that when we speak about institutionalization and or mainstreaming disaster risk reduction and resilience concept into national and local level policies and planning processes, I mean, the key things we have to ensure is that there is at both at national and local levels there is an allocation of financial and human resources for resilience building. That there is at national and cities level, they establish relevant disaster risk reduction and adaptation structures with clearly defined mandates, roles and responsibilities for these structures. Another thing which is important in institutionalization process is to invest quite heavily in developing capacities of these DRR and adaptation structures, institutional and staff capacity development processes. It is also important to ensure that if we speak about cities resilience building, that cities have needed mechanisms and commitment to conduct on a regular basis their disaster risks and city resilience assessments. It is another important element in institutionalization process of resilience and disaster risk reduction is to ensure that all the disaster risk reduction and resilience strategies and action plans that develop at national and city levels, that they are based on the findings of these assessments, findings of these assessment reports. Another important component to consider in this process is that cities should apply a resilience lens for reviewing and approving all new city public investment and development projects. I think that that's another important component in this process. There are many mechanisms that can and approaches that can help with this process. The one I want to revert to is that's been mentioned by the head of disaster risk reduction Asia and Pacific office, regional office. This is Making Cities Resilient 2030 Global Initiative. It is very good mechanism because it brings together all the partners and it focuses specifically in all these aspects I mentioned that are important for institutionalization of disaster risk reduction and resilience at national and local level, specifically at the local level. And just to mention that Regional Resource Center for Asia Pacific is an active partner of active regional partner of this MCR 2030 global initiatives. And for the last 6 years, through our regional training program, which is called Strengthening Cities Resilience to Climate and Disaster Risks, we were working in close collaboration with a number of UN agencies, including UNDRR, UN Habitat, UN ESCAP, UNEP, UNDP, and others to build and strengthen capacities of city government officials that they will have needed tools, mechanisms, and skills to effectively conduct their city's resilience assessments, that they will know their city risks, that they will be able to develop sound disaster risk reduction and resilient cities action plans and strategies using multi-stakeholder engagement approaches, and ensure that also they put on place all the needed mechanisms for review and approval of their cities' public investment and development projects. Back to the second part of your question, Purva, about how we can ensure greater commitment and engagement of local governments and other stakeholders in cities' resilience building process. I would like to say that a very important component is to create sense of ownership and buy-in of the city government officials in one hand, and on the other hand, again, create the same sense of ownership and buy-in of all these key stakeholders who will be impacted by this resilience programs and strategies and plans, and who also will be part of their implementation. Bearing that in mind, how it can be done, the approach which, to my point of view, works best is to engage all the key stakeholders in all the stages of understanding their cities' risks, contributing to conduct their cities' disaster risk assessment, their cities' resilience assessments, initiatives, engage them in and consult with them and get their input in developing and reviewing developed city resilience strategies and action plans, engage them in implementation and monitoring processes. Another important component in this process of engaging these different stakeholders is to find their entry point, identify their entry points, and support them with that they can meaningfully and effectively engage and contribute to these processes. I think I would like to stop here. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Armin. Now we'll just address one question here in the Q&A box. We have a question here, and it says, there's no name, it's an anonymous question. ADB recently said $26 trillion for infrastructure investment. Assume half of that will be for urban areas and peripheries, about 10% in need for the climate proofing, that is $1.3 trillion. How will the city find this money? Shall I ask Armin for that, since you have been dealing with a number of cities in terms of like accessing funding and developing plans? I think you would perhaps be the most appropriate person to answer that question. Would you mind answering that one? Or of course, if others want to.
Yeah, let me. Thank you, Purva. Let me try to answer. Do I think it would be good if we have any participants from ADB that they will provide a little bit more details and advice in this process. But the important things here that it's a very good news how cities can tap in and how they can access the fund. I think important components in this process is that again from our experience that before preparing any funding project proposals to access not only ADB funds, but any other donor funds. It is important to base these funding proposals on the findings of thoroughly and thoroughly conducted assessments, their cities risk assessments and resilience assessment, because this will make their proposals very strong. Another component is also to ensure that during this proposal preparation process, all your key stakeholders are consulted, engaged, they are part of the dialogue, and all their insights, recommendations, and ideas are duly incorporated into these proposals that will make it much stronger. Again, the focus of our session is looking for is also looking at the collaboration and then partnership building components. Again, bringing together all the needed structures, national and local in this process, engaging partners and looking for any co-funding, even in-kind possibilities to strengthen their proposals can make cities more effective and successful in the process of pushing their funding proposals. I think I will stop here, and yeah.
Okay, thank you, Armin, for your answer. I would like to go back to Ms. Arlene, Mayor of Santa Rosa City, with a question, especially with regard to, like, you have been talking about how a number of collaborations have taken place, and then it would perhaps be good for participants to know that when you do all this stakeholder consultation process and trying to involve a lot of other stakeholders in one platform, how do you think that it is inclusive, that no one has been left behind and everyone is included? So based on your perspective. And also, I would like to make a mention here that I had the opportunity to visit your beautiful city. That was perhaps a long time back. And the reason is that I went to the same university that you went, UPLB, as a part of my exchange program during the bachelor's degree program. So it's very honored, and I'm personally very thankful for your participation here, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Purba. I'm so happy to know that we're schoolmates. Anyway, here in the city of Santa Rosa, ever since I became mayor, and even when I was in Congress, a member of the parliament, we always do participatory governance in the city of Santa Rosa for everything, small, big project, local, or projects with international institutions or other NGOs. So it is vital to develop mechanisms in all of our programs. We do have mechanisms to ensure inclusivity throughout the process. In the Santa Rosa Watershed Management Council, it is our priority when we talk about the watershed that stakeholder groups are well represented within the framework. In fact, aside from the local government units and the academia, we also have members from the NGOs. In fact, the Save Santa Rosa River is an NGO, industries and civil society groups, which allow us to have diverse discussion, perspectives, and to create a good blend of informed decisions for the improvement of watershed management practices in the forms of policies, planning, and institutional systems. We also conduct stakeholder meetings and fora, which are well attended by all the stakeholders, like the fishermen, farmers, livelihood cooperatives, even the youth, the women, among others, that help us understand the plight of our stakeholders and formulate strategies that they can take ownership, as was mentioned a while ago, of and complements their needs. So here, in everything that we do, in every project and program, we make sure that first of all, the needs of the stakeholders and of other constituents that will be affected by the program are in place, and we know and that they'll be included in the program and planning. And all throughout the programs and the project, we do stakeholders meetings with them. And as I mentioned a while ago, it's participatory governance that we promote in Santa Rosa. And in everything we do, we make sure that everybody has a say in it.
Okay, thank you so much, madam. Thank you very much. So since we don't have a question to address at the moment, I would like to go back to Dr. Inu from Nepal again. and want to actually, maybe probably is interested because Nepal has experienced this big earthquake in 2015. And then, of course, by far, I think people in Nepal, I think, are very resilient. They brought back the city to life again. And I think in a way, I think people are more or less adaptive and they're quite resilient. And I'm very proud of that one. And in my case, I have had several opportunities to travel to Nepal before, and then also have visited some of those places with rebuilt again. And then, it went at one time was very low, and then a lot of new good things happened. In your capacity, as you mentioned, like having been involved in rebuilding all the structures, especially in the cultural front, like how you sort of particularly sort of engaged in that rebuilding, and while you're doing that, what are some of the challenges that you faced?
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I would like to share how the universities looked into this situation and how it acted. I'd like to share some of the examples that the universities did in this case. When during 2015 earthquake, when it's hit us, what the universities did was they came together, and then like Tribhuvan University from Center for Disaster Studies on my I was one of the member and coordinated the whole damage assessment of this 14 hard hit district. Our strength is our students, and they are our strength. So with these students, we helped the government in the response of these areas by collecting data on damage assessment with one of the ACT agencies, and this was for the shelter cluster of Nepal. So this is how one was the contribution was done by the universities. Even whenever the government applied for help in damage assessment of different institution, government institution, especially we want more into government institution. Our experts from our universities went, we had made the team and they went to do this damage assessment, not only inside Kathmandu Valley where we are situated, but damage assessment of different colleges related to Tribhuvan University all over Nepal had been done.
I think Dr. Inu is frozen now. Maybe the connection is not very good at her end. So in the meantime, I will let Dr. Inu speak later. Okay, please, Dr. Inu, please. You are frozen.
Am I audible? Okay.
Okay, yeah, okay. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Okay, yes. So I would like to share two.
I think probably we need to bring back Dr. Inu later at a later stage. She's frozen still. So in the meantime, let me go to Dr. Binay from IGES again. Since today's session is about developing a good collaborative mechanism that we need to promote more in order to accelerate action towards resilience building and capacity strengthening. In your work with IGES, or like it could be also related to earlier of your assignments, how do you think, what are some of the important mechanisms that we need to have in order to promote that?
Thank you, Mr. Purba, for this very important, I think, question. I think a lot of us, I think we have been hearing about this collaboration word for a long time, and I think we need it's indispensable if we consider, because if we consider we are living in a very connected system or connected world. But I think one thing I would like to first stress is like collaboration is usually not like a free thing. It involves resource and cost and resource. And so what means is a collaboration has to be some demand-based, so that it would first, for example, the demand should come from the like cities, like the areas where there is a high risk. So in that respect, what we have observed is probably we need a kind of, to synthesize, I think we need probably 3 kinds of collaboration. I think the first is, I think, within the cities or the local area, where like it has been already clear that that all relevant stakeholders need to embrace the idea similar to similar idea, like to foster a kind of sense of self-help or kind of mutual assistance. So that's, I think, will create a kind of environment that for all of the relevant stakeholders to come together and talk and discuss about the risk. And the second level of collaboration we need is, I think, slightly vertical collaboration still within the country or the province, where you connect with the university that we just hear, or other a government, specialized institution which provide the risk information. So we need to that kind of collaboration when the local communities or the cities, when they need such kind of help, they can immediately reach to such kind of area. And then the final one, I think the one and important one is a kind of regional collaboration, like the RRC.AP that we have been doing, and other several knowledge institutions that are doing. I think what is important is that we need to develop a kind of partnership and which will be able to address the key capacity gaps that cannot be overcome by single country or within a local area, but maybe best delivered or effectively delivered by this such kind of regional collaboration, which can, for instance, helps to bring this connecting best practices, organizing needs-based, I would say needs-based capacity building approaches, creating database or creating knowledge-based product. So I think this kind of three level of collaboration, I think we are somehow need to, there may be already existing several of those initiatives. We need to see how we avoid such duplication and look for synergy. And to share, taking this opportunity, I would also like to share initiative by Japanese government, which called Adaptation Information Platform, or APPLAT in short. And through this APPLAT, IGES and its partner, we are considering to promote a capacity building for the locally led DRR and CCA integration. I think such kind of through such kind of partnership and co-creation and co-design of the capacity building approach, I think we can enhance future collaboration. So thank you. I'd like to stop here.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Binay. We still have some 10 minutes to go, I think, so we can still try to bring in some conversations. I think Dr. Inu is back, but firstly, I will go to Mr. Armin. I'll provide a chance for Dr. Inu to complete her, but then firstly to Armin. In your understanding, working with a lot of city governors and also with city planners, and as I said before, having yourself on the ground, developing plans for the cities, what do you think are some of the key issues that cities are facing in assisting climate change and disaster risks, and developing and implementing a resilient action plans in the Asia and Pacific region?
Thank you, Purba. So speaking about the issues, I think the key issues they face is that they have specifically for conducting their disaster risk assessments and city resilience assessments, they need various technical skills on how to conduct very detailed assessments by themselves. For example, cities, they may have capacities to conduct a preliminary level city resilience assessment using their own capacities. That will require also minimal financial resources. But when it comes to conducting or tertiary level assessments and much more detailed level, where they have to look at all sectors of the city and assess them, I think they will need specialized technical skills and to conduct these high-level risk assessments, specifically in the areas of a flood or seismic risk assessments. There is also a need for financial allocations for conducting these risk assessments at the city level. Another issues cities face in conducting disaster risk assessments and city resilience assessment is availability and being able to collect reliable, accurate, and timely data, as well as to ensure that this data is properly analyzed. I will say that another important things, another issue to consider in this assessment process is that cities need to gain and maintain. There is a need for gaining and maintaining political support, because it may be difficult for the city to gain necessary political support to initiate and mainstream city resilience assessment. Another issue is that even if you've done this assessment and prepare your assessment reports, maybe the city government will not be very willing to share and disseminate the results of this assessment, risk assessment with city population. I think when we speak about issues with assessment, I will speak about these points. When we speak about issues in developing city resilience action plan, I will focus on telling that a very important component in development and implementation of any disaster risk reduction and city resilience action plan is to ensure that they are not standalone documents, that they are integrated as a component of wider city resilience, as a component of wider city development plan. This will help first to secure some financial resources, as well as that it will be seen as an important component of this wider city development plan. And definitely another component is that these plans are not only developed, but they are also properly communicated to all the structures and people who will be responsible for their implementation. And again, ensure that key stakeholders had a chance to be engaged in this process, contribute, consulted, and their recommendations incorporated, again, to ensure that it is based on local needs, consider all the local peculiarities and local knowledge, and that people get their sense of ownership, that it will consider not the city mayor's plan, but it's our plan. If you get to manage to get to that stage that people and the implementers of this plan can say, this is our resilience plan, I think this is 50% of the success to successfully implement these plans.
Okay, thank you, Armin. Can we get back Dr. Inu? Are you online, Dr. Inu?
Yes.
Yeah, so would you mind sort of like completing the last one, that especially in terms of challenges that you have been facing in terms of connecting or working with the other stakeholders, please?
Yes, what we see is that I'd like to share one of the best practices. What we see is that during the 2015 earthquake, the government came up with different relief packages. And what we found out that the vulnerable group or the marginal groups were the one who were not able to take advantage of this package because of the gap between the policies. Now, the universities with different agencies could work as a bridge between those two government policies and the vulnerable population. One example is that when the first installment was being given to all the population, for the second installment, they had to come up with this drawings, drawings of their houses. But the marginalized group and the vulnerable population were not able to come up with this drawings, and the drawings need to have this Sendai framework of the fourth policies, that is build back better issues was supposed to be ensured in their drawings. That is the technology, earthquake resilience technology was supposed to be there, and these people had no idea about it. So what the university came up with was the drawing camps. We had 2 to 3 days drawing camps on the site, call the local people in one area with the community, local government, and did their drawings, around 200 drawings in one camp. So these vulnerable groups and the marginalized population were able to get their second installment and build their houses on. So the policies which were the hindering part, which was there in the policies, was being bridged by the university with the help of UNDP and Department of Archaeology and the local government. We did in Sindhupalchok, we did in Melamchi and other hard-hit area. So this is one example where we saw there was a gap and the university could act accordingly. Another one was I would like to again share was a relocation issue of one of the Majigao area in Melamchi itself. So we tried to incorporate what was existing in the plan of the government, that was cluster approach, and what is needed by the local community, incorporated it, integrated it, and handed over to the municipality a complete relocation project. So the local government benefited it from it, community benefited it, and also the students. So there was always a win-win situation. So the university can always work as a bridge, I should always say, because the government sometimes cannot look into everything, is and there is some hindrance for them. Another part is that when we are talking about the reconstruction, the reconstruction of cultural heritage is being done throughout Kathmandu Valley and also outside Kathmandu Valley. Our university, through our students, have been looking into the doing the reassessment of the reconstruction that has been done, and also this has been published, and also we have been working with DOA regarding it. There are so multiple examples that we can share, but right now I'll just put forward these two examples. For climate change issues, we have been doing research in blue land use, how the ponds areas of traditional settlement ponds can contribute in adaptation of climate change or reduction of temperature that has been increasing in our society, in our settlement. And this has been done through our students, and in our PhD thesis also, how it is being long, how climate change and urbanization, since the it is very difficult to quantify certain things in terms of how climate change and urbanization works in a settlement. So for the politicians to have that number is very interesting, and when they see the number, quantify it, they get sensitized more. So this has also been done through our universities, through PhD programs, to quantify how the settlement is being has been introduced, or vulnerability has increased due to urbanization and in future climate change issues. So there are examples that we can share, but these are the thoughts I will put it in this short time. Thank you, Purva.
Thank you so much. It is really a comprehensive answer for the question. So thank you, sir, so much for your effort. And then we are almost towards the end. We have seen one question from Linda here. I was actually checking the Q&A box for questions, but I saw it in the chat. But unfortunately, we are very sorry that we won't be able to attend your question this time. But we'll take note of your questions and we'll try to answer. Linda, yeah, so sorry for that. So since we are towards the end of our session, so I'm sorry that we have to close this session. So I would like to close this session, make a bit of a summary of this session, and then would like to close it. So we have today looked at different aspects of collaboration, and then case studies from different areas, and the success of climate adaptation planning, including disaster risk reduction in the Santa Rosa city in the Philippines, how they do collaborate each other, and how inclusive means for them. And also like the case from Nepal, which is quite interesting, as I mentioned before, that after having this devastating earthquake, they were able to come to life again. So there has been involvement of universities and government collaboration. Not only those, there are several stakeholders, including UNESCO and a lot of others. So that has been quite an enriching knowledge for us. And also like looking at the international institutes like IGES and RRC.AP, like how, regional and international institutes, how they are sort of involved in supporting climate change in DRR in the region, and how they intend to scale up further, and what sort of concept they're using in adapting to climate change, so that we can reach out to them and try to work with them in the future and get their support. And all in all, we have learned that climate change adaptation in the cities required a very good collaborative effort in solving a problem, which is should be coordinated around all sector. Cities such as the Santa Rosa today are, I think, well positioned to act as a convener for range of partners. So, so in that way, I think city government themselves, I think, are the key drivers in making the city resilient, which means like they have to be at the top of the game to pull all the strings together to make their city resilient. And to do this, collaboration among stakeholders is now, I think, no longer an option, I think. It is quite imperative that we should build a strong partnership. And then, there are several opportunities that we can unlock, a lot of potentials, a wide range of expertise. There's a technology, there's a finance, and several other opportunities. On top of that, it requires, of course, adequate policy instrument and functioning of the institution. And it has to be, to best of our practice, to be led by local leaders. And then if not adequately based, I think it should also be, I think it is very important that we try to involve them at least and then empower them. So if we make cities as an integral part of solution in fighting our climate change, then we will have a profound impact in tackling global climate change. Just because of the fact that earlier speaker has spoken that, the cities are very important place. They are like, majority of the people live there. There's a huge emission going up there. So I think this will have a profound impact if we could do well in our cities. With the understanding of all of this knowledges and skills that people are sharing with us, who are involved in disaster risk reduction planning and execution, we hope that these conversations has been very useful for you. And especially even in the keynote address, the chief of UNDRR, he spoke about making city resilient 2030, which we also are a member of that one. And also my colleague Armin has spoken on that. It's very important that we get onto this platform to make our city resilient. I hope that all of this information will support you in developing collaborative efforts in planning for your cities, thereby being able to mainstream climate change into what we are doing right now for the cities, from infrastructure to finance to procurement. I think the opportunities are endless. And then we should try to do our best to communicate with the citizen about climate change in a way that matters to them. So finally, I would like to close here and would like to thank you so much for your engagement with us today. With this, I would also like to thank all the participants for your time and our key partners, IGES, UNDRR, and Ministry of Environment, Japan, and all our distinguished panelists once again for consenting to deliver your conversation on this platform, and then enriching us with your knowledge and experience. And I would also like to thank the support of APAN Forum Secretariat and UNDP for leading this stream and providing a valuable guidance for all of us. Finally, I would like to express my gratitude to the Ministry of Environment, Government of Japan, for their continued leadership in the region in providing necessary support to climate change impacts, and of course, for support of our climate change cluster here at the AIT RRC.AP. So thank you once again, everyone. Have a nice day and stay safe. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for attending today's session as part of the 7th Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum. Please join us for the technical sessions beginning at 2 p.m. Bangkok time, focusing on inclusive and nature-based resiliences. You can find the link to join these sessions by returning to the Sessions tab on the APAN Forum Conference community on Hub below. Within the community, you can also explore the exhibitions as well as chat or set up meetings with other conference attendees. Join the conversation on social media using the hashtag APAN2020. Thank you once again for your participation and see you in the next sessions.